Welcome to Tales Lab, where lying wives and sneaky girlfriends finally get exposed. From girls' trips that never happened to coworkers who were a little too friendly, we break down every red flag, messy receipt, and suspicious text with humor, shock, and just a little bit of petty. Expect wild stories, dramatic reactions, and satisfying karma as the truth comes crashing through the door. If you love relationship tea, plot twists, and seeing players get played, this channel is your new home. Every single chaotic, jaw-dropping, binge-worthy episode. Hit subscribe and never miss a fresh dose of exposed cheating. Don't forget to check our previous stories. Let's get into it. The cruelest thing my wife, Danielle Knox Avery, ever did was let another man call her babe right in front of me, then smile like I was the inconvenience for noticing. She did it at a rooftop mixer in Dallas, under warm string lights and skyline views, with people watching. When I asked her to correct him, she leaned close to my ear and said, calm and sharp, "Do not embarrass me." In the car, she shrugged and added, "It was nothing." She didn't defend me. She didn't respect me. She measured my dignity in public and decided I could go without it. Here's how it happened. I'm Malcolm Avery, a black man who manages logistics for a medical supply company. My job taught me to watch patterns, track details, and stay calm when other people panic. Danielle loved that about me at first. She said I made her feel safe. She worked in marketing and always carried herself like she belonged in any room. When we met at a friend's birthday dinner in Houston, she laughed at my dry jokes, stole fries off my plate like it was a contract she'd already signed, and texted me the next morning, "I had fun. Don't disappear." I didn't. I showed up consistently. The early months felt light, romantic in a way that didn't try too hard. We did late-night grocery runs and made up stories about strangers in line, whispering ridiculous backstories until we had to hide our laughter behind the cart. Danielle had this habit of dancing in the kitchen when she cooked. Little shoulder shimmies, a grin like she couldn't help herself. One night, she tried to make homemade pizza and nearly set off the smoke alarm. We fanned it with a cutting board, laughing like teenagers, and she smeared flour on my cheek like she was marking me. I remember thinking, this is home. We got married 2 years later in Fort Worth. Small ceremony, close family, real joy. Danielle cried when she walked down the aisle, and when I saw her, I felt steady in my chest, like I'd made the right decision with my whole life. Our first year was good. We took a road trip to San Antonio, ate breakfast tacos in a tiny spot off the highway, and argued playfully about which playlist was better. She took pictures of me when I wasn't looking, then showed me the worst ones on purpose. "This is my husband," she'd say proud. The shift didn't arrive as a thunderclap. It came like tiny cuts, small enough to ignore, frequent enough to bleed you out slowly. Danielle started correcting me in public in little ways that felt unnecessary. If I told a story, she'd interrupt to fix a detail. If I made a joke, she'd stare like it embarrassed her. The first time she did it around her friends at brunch in Plano, I smiled through it and changed the subject. Later, I told her privately it bothered me. She didn't apologize. She said, "You are too sensitive." Then she acted like that settled it. Danielle also began using silence like a weapon. If I asked a direct question about money, plans, time, she'd go quiet and stare at her phone like I wasn't there. I'd try again, calmly, and she'd sigh like my voice was heavy. It made me start choosing my words carefully, like I was walking across glass. One night, she came home late and smelled like someone else's cologne clung to the air around her. I asked where she'd been. She didn't even look up from her purse. "Stop interrogating me," she said, and went to bed with her back turned. Around that time, she started bringing up a man named Terrence Rowe from work. At first, it was casual. "Terrence thinks this campaign idea is strong. Terrence says the client is difficult." Then his name became a regular guest in our living room. Danielle would be laughing at her phone, thumbs moving fast, and when I walked in, her screen would tilt away. I didn't demand access. I didn't raise my voice. I simply asked, "Are you happy?" Danielle looked me up and down like the question itself irritated her. "Yes." "Why do you always make things weird?" she replied. My first small piece of karma came without effort from me. Danielle tried to make me look foolish at a couple's game night in Irving. She told everyone I always forget things and nudged her friend to laugh. The problem was I had quietly handled every reservation, bill, and schedule for months. Her friend's husband asked, "So who arranged this whole night?" Danielle opened her mouth, then stopped. Everyone looked at me. I said, "Simply, I did." The room went quiet. Then a few people nodded like they'd been thinking it. Danielle's smile tightened. She changed the subject fast. She didn't apologize afterward. She just acted annoyed that reality showed up. Danielle's disrespect wasn't only social. It was personal and strategic. She started treating my presence like an inconvenience. If I sat beside her on the couch, she'd get up. If I reached for her hand in public, she'd slip away to adjust her hair. On my birthday, she posted a photo of herself with a generic caption about growth, but forgot to mention me at all. When I calmly said it hurt, she stared at me like I'd asked her for something unreasonable. "You want applause for being a husband?" she asked. That sentence sat in my chest for weeks like a stone I couldn't swallow. Still, there were moments where I tried to bring us back to what we were. I planned a weekend in Austin. Nothing flashy, just a good hotel and a comedy show, because Danielle used to laugh so hard she'd press her face into my shoulder. At dinner, I told a story about a warehouse mistake at work that turned into a harmless, ridiculous supply chain mystery. She laughed, genuinely, for a minute. I felt hope rise. Then her phone lit up. Her eyes softened at the screen in a way I hadn't seen directed at me in months. She typed fast and said, "Keep talking," without listening. On the drive back, I asked her calmly, "Who are you texting so much?" Danielle didn't deny it. She didn't reassure me. She attacked the question. "You don't get to monitor me," she snapped. I said, evenly, "I'm not monitoring. I'm asking." She rolled her eyes and said, "It's nothing." That became her favorite phrase, 2 words that dismissed my instincts, my feelings, my dignity. And every time she said it, it felt like she was training me to accept less than basic respect. I started sleeping lighter, waking when she moved, noticing when she didn't come to bed at all. The rooftop mixer in Dallas was the moment everything turned sharp. Danielle insisted we go because networking matters, and she wanted me there like an accessory. Steady husband, clean suit, polite smile. I played my role without complaint. The view was beautiful, the crowd loud. Danielle moved through the room like she owned the air. Then Terrence appeared like he'd been invited into her life without my consent. He slid close, eyes on her, not me, and said, smooth and familiar, "Hey, babe." Danielle smiled. Not surprised. Not offended. Comfortable. That comfort hit me harder than the word. I waited 1 beat for her to correct him. She didn't. Terrence glanced at me like I was a coat rack and asked Danielle if she wanted another drink. Danielle answered him first. When I stepped slightly closer and said, "I'm her husband," Terrence's mouth curled like he'd heard a joke. Danielle finally turned to me, not to defend me, but to manage me. "Malcolm, relax," she said low and controlled. The disrespect wasn't only Terrence's. It was Danielle choosing, in real time, whose feelings mattered. And it wasn't mine. In the car, I kept my voice calm because volume wasn't going to save my marriage. "Why do you call you that?" I asked. Danielle stared forward, streetlights moving across her face like she was already done with the conversation. "It was nothing," she said. I asked, "Then why didn't you stop it?" Danielle exhaled sharply and replied, "Because you always turn everything into a scene." I said, "I didn't make a scene. He did." Danielle's answer was cold and final. "Do not embarrass me again. No remorse. No concern. Just control." After that, the cruelty became bolder. Danielle began forgetting to include me in plans, then blaming me for feeling excluded. She'd come home smelling like a lounge and say she was working late. She started making snide comments about how I needed reassurance, like I was weak. One night, when I tried to talk, she laughed and said, "You should be grateful someone like me married you." I remember the exact second my stomach dropped, because that's not something you say by accident. That's something you believe. I nodded once, quietly, and stopped offering her my emotions like they were negotiable. Karma showed up again in a small, realistic way, through numbers. Danielle liked spending. I didn't mind, as long as it was honest and within what we agreed. But she began making purchases that didn't match our conversations. Weekend charges in Grapevine, expensive dinners I wasn't at, ride shares late at night. When I asked, she said, "Stop acting like my father." So I stopped asking and started documenting. Not to win, to protect myself. Danielle wanted me confused and reactive. I got precise and quiet. Every receipt became a timestamp. Every denial became a note. She didn't know it yet, but she was building my exit plan for me. The funniest part, darkly funny, was how Danielle still tried to perform romance when it benefited her. If her mother came over, Danielle would kiss my cheek and call me "La" like she'd been doing it all week. Once, at a family barbecue in Arlington, she sat in my lap for exactly 30 seconds while her aunt took a photo. The second the camera lowered, she stood up and said, "I'm hot," like my body had become a chair she no longer needed. I didn't react. I watched. Danielle's family praised our strong marriage, while I quietly realized I was living inside a presentation, not a partnership. Around this time, we had one genuinely good night that almost fooled me. Danielle and I cooked together, salmon, rice, vegetables like we used to. She teased me for lining up spices like a warehouse shelf, and I laughed despite myself. We drank sparkling water like it was champagne, slow danced for a minute to an old song, and she rested her head on my chest. For a brief window, I felt my shoulders loosen. Then her phone buzzed. She looked down, smiled at the screen, soft, private, and stepped away to answer. She came back colder. The warmth wasn't for me. It never was. 2 weeks before the Dallas mixer, there had been a break-in on our street, and I installed a dash cam in my car. It recorded audio automatically. I didn't set it up to spy. I set it up for safety. Danielle knew it was there. She even joked, "Now you can watch me drive like a grandma." Then one afternoon, she insisted on borrowing my car for errands, because hers needed gas. I handed her the keys without suspicion. That's the part people don't understand. You can trust someone and still be betrayed. You can love someone and still be used. That same evening, I pulled the footage only to check the camera worked. I expected traffic noise and radio static. Instead, I heard Danielle's voice, clear and comfortable, laughing. Then Terrence. The tone between them wasn't professional. It was intimate, familiar in a way that made my throat tighten. He called her babe, like it was normal. Danielle didn't correct him. She responded like she'd been waiting for it. Then she said my name with a kind of casual disrespect that felt worse than yelling. She joked that I never leaves. She mocked how calm I stayed. She talked about money like it was hers to take. I listened once, then again, because my mind refused to accept what my ears had already confirmed. The recording wasn't vague. It was a full conversation, plans, jokes, little insults about me, even details about where they met. Danielle sounded relaxed, like betrayal had become routine. Terrence sounded bold, like my marriage was a joke he'd already won. I didn't cry right away. My body went cold first. Then the grief arrived, heavy, slow, private. I sat in my car in the driveway with the engine off, staring at the steering wheel, feeling like the life I built had been hollowed out without me noticing. Danielle came inside later, cheerful, humming, acting like nothing had happened. She asked what I wanted for dinner. The normality was almost insulting. I looked at her face and realized I didn't recognize the person in front of me anymore. I didn't confront her then. I didn't want a messy argument or a performance of denial. I wanted control over my own outcome. So I moved quietly. I opened a new bank account in my name only. I redirected my direct deposit. I gathered documents. I met with an attorney during lunch breaks. Danielle thought my silence meant defeat. It meant strategy. Karma continued arriving in small, earned pieces. Danielle tried to punish me with coldness, but it only taught me independence. I started taking care of myself like I mattered. Early workouts, clean meals, therapy sessions I didn't announce, long walks through Clyde Warren Park in Dallas when my chest felt tight. Danielle mocked me once, "So now you're into self-help?" And I just said, "I'm into health." She rolled her eyes, no remorse. Meanwhile, my supervisor noticed my focus and offered me a better role with a pay bump. I didn't celebrate loudly. I simply said yes and didn't tell Danielle. Danielle's sister Renee hosted a Sunday dinner in Arlington where Danielle tried to paint me as the problem. She did it in that smooth way, calm voice, careful words, so anyone who didn't know us would think she was reasonable. Malcolm has been acting distant, she said, like I was misbehaving. He gets paranoid. Terrence was there too, introduced as a co-worker. Danielle watched me while she spoke, waiting for me to react. I didn't. I ate slowly, listened, and let her build the stage she thought she controlled. The moment she called me insecure with a small smile, I knew it was time. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone and a small speaker I'd brought. My hands didn't shake because I'd already done the grieving in private. Danielle frowned like I was violating her comfort. "What are you doing?" she asked. I looked at the table and said one sentence, calmly. "You've been calling me paranoid. I'm gonna let everyone hear what nothing sounds like." Danielle's eyes narrowed. Terrence sat up straighter. Nobody spoke. Then I pressed play. Danielle's laughter filled the room first. Then Terrence's voice. Then the word, babe. When the audio ended, Danielle didn't cry. She didn't beg. She didn't show shame. She stared at me like I'd committed the real offense. "So you recorded me," she said, disgusted. "That is weird." Terrence didn't apologize either. He scoffed, stood up, and muttered something about drama. Renee looked shocked, but not supportive. More like she didn't want this staying near her table. Danielle's mother asked, "Danielle, is this true?" Danielle shrugged. "He's overreacting," she said. No remorse. No accountability. Just the same cold strategy, deny my right to be harmed. I didn't argue. I didn't try to convince anyone. I simply stood, thanked Renee for dinner, and left. Outside, the air felt lighter than the house. Danielle called my phone before I got to the car. I didn't answer. She texted, "You're not going to ruin my life because you're insecure." I stared at the message and felt something inside me settle. The woman I married was not confused. She was committed. I drove home, packed a bag, and moved into a short-term place in Addison that same night. No speeches, no scenes, just action. The real karma didn't come from embarrassment. It came from consequences where charm cannot help you. Paperwork, finances, time. My attorney used the audio and the documented transactions to support what Danielle kept denying. How she'd been moving through our marriage like it was a resource to extract. Danielle lost access to the joint accounts she treated like a private wallet. She tried to pressure me, then threatened me, then tried to guilt me. None of it worked. Terrence vanished the moment things got serious. He didn't show up to support her when responsibility arrived. He was brave only when the cost was mine. My transformation didn't happen on social media. It happened in my daily life, quietly where it counts. I moved into a clean apartment in Frisco, furnished it slowly, and built routines that didn't revolve around someone else's moods. I took my promotion and used the money to stabilize my future, not to impress anyone. I slept through nights without flinching at footsteps. I laughed again, real laughter, at small things like burning toast and turning it into a joke instead of a fight. I reconnected with friends I'd gotten distant from. Peace felt unfamiliar at first. Then it felt like mine. Danielle never offered a sincere apology because remorse was never part of her plan. Even near the end, she acted like losing me was an inconvenience, not a tragedy she caused. The last conversation we had, she said, "You always wanted to be right." I looked at her and realized she still didn't understand what I wanted. I didn't want to be right. I wanted to be respected. I wanted a partner who protected the marriage instead of testing how much pain I would tolerate. I walked away without begging, without shouting, without collapsing. And privately, steadily, I became successful in the one way that mattered most. I got my life back. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.